There's something nobody tells you about the words you say every morning. Not the meaning of them. Not even whether you believe them. Something more basic than that. When you open your mouth and speak, really speak, not just think, not just write in a journal, but actually let the sound leave your body, something happens in the physical world around you. Your vocal cords vibrate. That vibration moves through the air as a wave. And sound waves don't just travel. They reorganize matter. Scientists have filmed it. You put fine particles on a metal plate, run a specific frequency through it, and those particles rearrange themselves into geometric patterns. Change the frequency, the pattern changes. Every single time. Your voice does that. Every time you open your mouth. Florence Scovel Shinn knew this. Not as a physics experiment, but as a spiritual law she had watched work in real lives, including her own. And in 1925 she wrote something that most people skimmed right past. She said the spoken word is the most powerful tool a human being has. Not prayer. Not visualization. Not positive thinking. The spoken word. And she was very specific about which words. Not affirmations. Not wishes dressed up as sentences. Something much more precise than that. 3 words, used a certain way with a certain understanding behind them. That's what this video is about. Most women who find Florence Scovel Shinn find her the same way. They're tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. The kind that builds up over years of doing everything right and still feeling like something essential is missing. Like the math never quite adds up, no matter how carefully you run the numbers. Maybe you've been saying affirmations for a while now. Maybe you started a few months ago, maybe a few years. You say them in the morning, sometimes in the car, sometimes in that quiet moment before sleep when the worry tends to get loudest. I am abundant. Money flows to me easily. I am open to receive. And you mean them. That's the part nobody talks about. You actually mean them when you say them. But somewhere underneath the words, there's a quieter voice. And that voice is saying something different. It's not loud. It doesn't interrupt. It just sits there, underneath everything, like a current running in the opposite direction. But what about the bill that's due Thursday? But what about the years that already passed? But what about everything you already tried? Florence called that voice the adversary. Not a demon. Not a punishment. Just the accumulated weight of everything you've been told, everything you've witnessed, everything that didn't work out the way you planned. It lives in the subconscious, and it is patient in a way that most of us are not. And here's the thing she understood that changes everything. When you speak an affirmation while that undercurrent is running, you're not decreeing. You're arguing with yourself. Loud. The words go one direction. The feeling goes another. And the universe, she said, doesn't respond to the words alone. It responds to the whole signal. The word and the frequency it carries when it leaves your body. This is why 2 women can say the exact same sentence and get entirely different results. Same words. Same morning routine. Same number of repetitions. But one of them is speaking from a place of quiet knowing, and the other is speaking from a place of desperate hoping. And hoping, she was very clear about this, is not faith. Hope says, maybe this time. Faith says, it's already done. Those are not the same frequency. Not even close. And your body knows the difference. Your vocal cords know the difference. The air around you registers the difference. Shinn wrote that words are the most creative force in the universe, but only when they are spoken in alignment. When the word and the inner state are the same thing. When there's no contradiction running underneath. She had a client once, a woman who had been affirming financial abundance for over a year with no visible result. She came to Shinn frustrated, almost defeated. And Shinn sat with her for a while, and then asked her a simple question. What do you feel when you say the words? The woman was quiet for a moment, and then she said, scared. Scared. Not hopeful. Not faithful. Scared. Scared that it wouldn't work. Scared that she had already waited too long. Scared that maybe she was the kind of person these things just didn't work for. And every morning, she was taking that fear, dressing it up in the language of abundance, and sending it out into the world wrapped in words that didn't match what was underneath. Shinn didn't judge her. She had seen it too many times to be surprised by it. She called it praying amiss, asking for one thing while vibrating at the frequency of its opposite. And this is where the science becomes impossible to ignore, not as a spiritual metaphor, but as a literal physical fact. When you speak, your vocal cords don't just produce sound. They produce pressure waves that travel outward from your body at over 700 miles per hour. Those waves interact with everything they touch: walls, furniture, the air molecules in the room, the water in your own cells. Your body is roughly 60% water, which means every time you open your mouth, you are vibrating yourself from the inside. Researchers have filmed what happens when specific sound frequencies meet physical matter. Fine particles arranged on a flat surface reorganize themselves instantly when a tone is introduced. Change the frequency, the pattern changes. The matter responds, not metaphorically, not spiritually, but physically, measurably, every single time. Your voice is that frequency. And what determines the frequency isn't just the words. It's the state of the person speaking them. Two people can produce the same sound waves at the surface level, but the resonance underneath, the emotional charge, the level of tension or ease in the body, the presence or absence of fear, that changes the quality of what's actually being transmitted. Shinn understood this intuitively long before anyone was filming particles on metal plates. She wrote that the word, spoken in faith, carries a power that nothing can resist. But spoken in fear, even beautiful, carefully chosen words, it carries that instead. So she did something very specific with that woman who came to her frightened and exhausted. She didn't give her new affirmations. She didn't tell her to say the words louder, or more often, or with more conviction. She told her to stop, to get quiet, to sit with herself long enough to feel what was actually happening underneath the performance of positivity she had built around herself like a shell. Because the words were never the problem. The words were just the surface. What lived underneath them, that was what needed to change first. And Shinn had a way of doing that. Specific way. Not complicated. Not requiring years of inner work or a complete personality overhaul. 3 words said a certain way from a certain place inside you. But before I tell you what they are, and I will, that's exactly where we're going, there's something you need to understand about why most people never get there. It's not lack of faith. It's not bad luck. It's not that the law doesn't work for them. It's something much simpler. And much more fixable. Here's what nobody explains when they hand you a list of affirmations. The subconscious mind doesn't process language the way the conscious mind does. It doesn't hear your words and evaluate them for meaning. It doesn't weigh them against logic or consider whether they make sense. It responds to something older than language. Something more primitive and more honest. It responds to feeling. And feelings, unlike words, cannot be faked. You can decide to say, I am abundant, at 7 in the morning while standing in your kitchen. You can say it clearly, firmly, with good posture and eye contact in the mirror. But if the feeling underneath those words is the tight, quiet dread of someone who checked her bank account last night and didn't sleep well after, that is what gets through. That is the signal the subconscious receives. That is what it acts on. Shinn described the subconscious as the most faithful servant imaginable. It doesn't question, doesn't argue. It doesn't have opinions about what you deserve or don't deserve. It simply takes whatever you give it with emotional intensity and builds your outer world to match. Which sounds like good news, and it is, eventually. But first it explains something that a lot of women carry as a private shame for years. Why it didn't work. Not why the law doesn't work. The law works with a consistency that would make gravity look unreliable. But why their particular version of it, the one they practiced faithfully for months or years, produced so little? It's not because they weren't trying hard enough. It's because they were trying too hard. There's a quality that Shinn returned to again and again in her writing. She called it different things at different times. Surrender. the effortless faith of a child. But what she was pointing at was always the same thing. A state of inner stillness from which the spoken word could be released without grasping, without fear, without the white-knuckled need to control the outcome. She used the word decree. Not affirmation. Not prayer in the pleading sense. Decree. A decree is not a request. It's not a hope. It's not even a statement of what you'd like to be true. A decree is a declaration of what is. Spoken from the part of you that already knows, that has always known, that doesn't need to be convinced. The difference in how it feels in the body is unmistakable once you've experienced it. An affirmation said from fear has a slight upward pull at the end, even when your voice stays flat. Like a question pretending to be a statement. I am abundant, but are you though? Are you sure? Please let it be true. A decree lands differently. Has weight. Has stillness. It doesn't need an answer because it isn't asking. Now you might be reading this and thinking, that sounds beautiful, but I don't know how to get to that place. I don't feel that stillness. Feel the fear. That's the whole problem. And that is exactly the right question. Because Shinn had an answer for it. Not a technique that requires perfect emotional conditions you may not have access to right now. Not something that only works once you've already healed everything and resolved every limiting belief and done 5 years of inner work. Something you can use today. In your kitchen. In your car. In the 30 seconds between waking up and remembering everything that's worrying you. 3 words that work not because they're magic syllables, but because of what they do to the nervous system when spoken correctly. What they interrupt. What they replace. She taught them quietly. To clients who came to her with nothing left to try. And the results she documented were not subtle. Let me tell you about a woman named Ruth. She wasn't one of Shinn's famous cases. She wasn't a socialite or an artist or someone with a dramatic story of ruin and recovery. She was ordinary in the way that most of us are ordinary. Which is to say, she was carrying more than anyone looking at her from the outside would have guessed. She was in her mid-50s. She had worked her whole life. Not carelessly. Carefully, conscientiously. The way women of her generation were taught to work. Head down. No complaints. Trust the process. And somewhere along the way, the process had not held up its end of the arrangement. She wasn't destitute. But she was tired of being one unexpected expense away from panic. Tired of the mental arithmetic that never stopped. Tired of smiling at her grandchildren while quietly calculating whether she could afford the little things that make a grandmother feel generous. The small indignities of a life lived just slightly below the level of ease. She came to Shinn's teaching through a friend who pressed a copy of The Game of Life into her hands and said, "Just read it." She read it in 2 days. Then she read it again. And she started affirming. Every morning, every night. Abundant. Provided for. Blessed. 3 months passed. Nothing shifted. She almost quit. She told herself it was for younger women, or more spiritual women, or women who hadn't already used up whatever portion of grace had been allocated to them. And then she read one paragraph she had somehow skimmed past the first 2 times. Shinn wrote, "The word must be spoken with authority and a feeling of completion, as though the thing desired is already an accomplished fact. Not hope. Not request. Completion." Ruth sat with that word for a long time. And she realized she had been speaking every affirmation as a petition. A letter to a God she wasn't sure was listening, asking for something she wasn't sure she deserved, in a language she wasn't sure she was using correctly. She had never once spoken as though it was already done. She didn't know how to do that. The gap between where she was and where she wanted to be felt too wide, too honest, too real to pretend across. And that's when she found the 3 words. Not a long affirmation. Not a list of things she was calling in. 3 words that didn't require her to pretend the gap wasn't there. But that shifted something in her body every time she said them. Something in the chest. Something in the breath. I am provided. That's it. Not I am rich. Not money flows to me in avalanches of abundance. Nothing that asked her nervous system to leap across a chasm it didn't believe in. Just, I am provided. Present tense. Quietly certain. Already true in some layer of reality she was choosing to acknowledge rather than argue with. She said it the first time and felt something release in her shoulders she hadn't realized she was holding. She said it the second time and her breath went slightly deeper. By the third time something had shifted. Not in her bank account, not yet, but in the quality of the silence inside her. The arithmetic in her head went quiet for a moment. Just a moment. But she hadn't had that moment in years. If this is landing for you right now, if something in you recognizes what Ruth felt in that kitchen, I want you to know there are more women like her here. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, this would be a good moment. This is the kind of content we come back to again and again when we need to remember what we know. Because what happened next for Ruth wasn't magic. It was the law, working exactly as Shinn said it would. Within 6 weeks, 3 things shifted in her financial life. None of them dramatic, none of them lottery winning, but all of them real. A check she had forgotten about. A client who returned after 2 years. A bill that was forgiven without explanation. Not because she had said the right words. Because she had finally said them from the right place. So why those 3 words specifically? That's the question worth sitting with. Because Shinn wasn't arbitrary. She didn't hand people phrases the way you'd hand someone a Lucky Charm and tell them to rub it twice before bed. Everything she taught had a reason behind it. A logic rooted in how the mind actually works, how language actually moves through the body, how the subconscious actually receives instruction. I am provided. Let's start with the I am. In Shinn's framework, and in the broader mystical tradition she drew from, I am is not a grammatical construction. It's a declaration of identity. It's the most powerful prefix a human being can attach to anything, because whatever follows it, the subconscious accepts as a description of self. Not as a goal, not as a wish, as a current present living fact about who you are. This is why I am sick keeps people sick longer than they need to be. Why I am unlucky becomes a self-fulfilling pattern that looks, from the outside, like evidence rather than cause. The subconscious doesn't fact-check I am statements, files them immediately, and then goes to work building a reality that matches. Which means I am provided gets filed the same way. Not as aspiration, as identity. But why provided and not abundant or wealthy or rich? This is where Shinn's precision becomes almost surgical. For a woman standing in the gap, the space between where she is financially and where she needs to be, words like rich or wealthy can trigger an immediate internal contradiction. The subconscious hears the word and cross-references it against current evidence. And current evidence says, no. That contradiction is felt in the body as a low-grade resistance, sometimes barely perceptible, but enough to dilute the decree before it ever takes root. Provided is different. It's quieter, more intimate. It doesn't ask you to leap to a destination you can't yet see. It asks you to acknowledge something that, if you look honestly, has always been true in some form, that you have been provided for. That you are here. That something has sustained you through every difficulty you have already survived. That the provision has never fully stopped, even in the hardest seasons. Meets you where you are. And from where you are, it tells the truth. That truth, spoken in I am language, begins to reorganize the subconscious pattern around it. Shinn called this building on a rock rather than sand. You need a foundation the doubting mind can't immediately dismantle. I am provided is that foundation. It's solid enough to stand on while the larger shift takes place underneath. And then there's the physical dimension. What happens in the body when those specific words are spoken aloud, slowly, with intention? The I grounds you in the present. The am anchors you in being rather than doing or wanting. The provided releases the grasping. Because provision implies a source outside yourself, a flow that is coming toward you rather than something you must produce entirely through effort and will. For women who have spent decades believing that nothing arrives unless they personally go out and drag it in, that is not a small shift. That is, in some ways, everything. Because the exhaustion that most women carry around money isn't really about money. It's about the belief that they are alone in the effort. That there is no support coming. That the universe is indifferent and the only thing standing between them and disaster is how hard they personally are willing to work. I am provided is a direct counter-instruction to that belief. Said daily. Said slowly. Said from the stillness Shinn described. Not performed stillness, not forced calm, but the genuine quiet that comes when you let the words land in the body instead of launching them out like arrows you're hoping hit a target. It begins to loosen something. Not overnight, but with a consistency that compounds. And Shinn was very specific about what to do, and what not to do, in the hours and days after speaking it. She called it the silence after the decree. And she treated it as seriously as the decree itself. Most people, when they discover a spiritual practice that feels true, do the same thing. They say the words, and then immediately start scanning, checking, looking for evidence that something shifted, watching the phone in case someone calls with good news, refreshing the bank account, cataloging every small thing that goes wrong as proof that it isn't working. And every small thing that goes right is a sign they need to say the words more, faster, louder, with greater urgency. Shinn called this crossing your own wires. The decree goes out. And then the fear goes out right behind it, chasing it, tangling around it, pulling it back. She used an image that has stayed with me. She said that speaking a decree and then immediately worrying about the outcome is like planting a seed and digging it up every morning to check if it's growing. You will never see the root take hold that way. Not because the seed is bad. Not because the soil is wrong. But because you keep interrupting the process at exactly the moment it needs to be left alone. The silence after the decree is not passive. It's not indifference. It's an active choice to trust the mechanism you've just set in motion. To treat the thing as done. Not because you can see it yet, but because you understand that the visible always follows the invisible, and the invisible is already in motion. This is perhaps the hardest part for women who have learned, over a lifetime, that nothing gets done unless they do it themselves. The silence feels irresponsible, feels like giving up. It feels, at first, almost indistinguishable from defeat. But Shinn was clear. The work of the spoken word happens in the space between the speaking and the manifestation. And that space must be held with a particular quality of faith. Not anxious waiting, but calm expectancy. The way you might wait for a train you know is coming. You're not frantic. You're not doubting. You're simply there ready because you know it's on its way. She had a client who struggled with this more than almost anyone else she worked with. A woman who had built an entire identity around being someone who made things happen. Capable, resourceful, in control. The idea of speaking 3 words and then releasing felt not just difficult but almost offensive to everything she believed about how life worked. Shinn told her something that stopped her completely. She said, "The part of you that needs to control the outcome is the same part that created the problem. You cannot solve it from the same place." The woman didn't speak for a long moment. And then she said, "I don't know how to let go of that." And Shinn said, "You don't have to let go of all of it at once. Just let go of it for the length of the decree. 3 words. That's all I'm asking. For those 3 words, let the part of you that knows be louder than the part of you that fears. Then go about your day. And tomorrow do it again. That's the practice. Not a grand transformation achieved in a single session of deep inner work. A daily returning, daily choosing. A small, quiet act of realignment that over time rewires the pattern at a level deeper than conscious thought can reach. Now, if you've been with me this long, I want to take just a moment to say something directly. This channel exists because there are women who need to hear this. Not a version of it dressed up in urgency and promises. The real thing, slow, honest, grounded in what Shinn actually taught. If that's been valuable to you today, I'd love for you to subscribe. It helps this content reach more women who are sitting somewhere right now feeling like Ruth felt, capable and exhausted and quietly wondering if something is about to shift. And when a new video goes up, you'll be the first to know. Now, back to what Shinn said about the moment the shift actually becomes visible. 'Cause there's a pattern to it. And once you know what to look for, you'll recognize it immediately when it starts happening in your own life. The shift rarely arrives the way you expect it to. That's the first thing worth knowing. Because most of us, when we begin a practice like this, have a picture in our minds of what the answer is going to look like. A specific amount, specific source, a specific sequence of events that leads from where we are to where we need to be. And we hold that picture so tightly, so specifically, that we can miss what's actually arriving because it came through a door we weren't watching. Shinn called this outlining, deciding in advance not just what you want, but exactly how it must come and through which channel. And she was firm about it. Outlining, she said, is one of the most common ways people block their own answered prayers. Because the universe, she wrote, is not limited to your imagination of what's possible. It has access to channels you don't know exist, connections you haven't made yet, circumstances you couldn't have engineered on your own if you tried. When you outline, you're essentially telling an intelligence far larger than yours that you'll only accept the answer if it comes in the envelope you've already addressed. And most of the time, the answer comes in a completely different envelope. A phone call from someone you hadn't thought about in years. An opportunity that arrives sideways, through a conversation that seemed unrelated. A sudden clarity about something you'd been confused about for months, that opens a door you didn't know was there. A sense, quiet and certain, that something has released. And then, days later, the physical evidence of that release appearing in your life. The women who work with Shinn's teachings long enough begin to recognize the signs. Not with superstition, not with magical thinking, but with the calm attention of someone who has learned to read a pattern. There's usually a sense of lightness first. Before the physical evidence arrives, something in the body relaxes. The arithmetic in the head goes quieter. Sleep improves slightly. The low-grade vigilance that has been running underneath everything, that constant, exhausting background monitoring of threat levels, begins to ease. Shinn said this is the moment to pay careful attention. Not to push harder. Not to take it as a signal to add more affirmations or increase the intensity of the practice. But to notice. To receive the lightness as its own form of evidence that the decree has landed somewhere real. And then to stay steady. Because this is also the moment she warned about most urgently. The moment just before the visible shift, she said, is often when the adversary gets loudest. When the doubts come back with renewed force. When circumstances can seem to get slightly worse before they get better. Not because the practice isn't working, but because the old pattern is making one last effort to reassert itself before it loses its hold. She told her clients, if things seem to get harder right after you begin, do not take that as a sign to stop. Take it as a sign that something is moving. Resistance only increases when something is changing. Stagnation is quiet. Movement creates friction. Stay with the decree. I am provided. Say it in the morning before the day has a chance to argue with you. Say it in the car when the worry starts its familiar loop. Say it at night when the silence gets loud and the numbers start running in your head again. Not frantically. Not desperately. The way Ruth eventually learned to say it. With the quiet authority of a woman who has decided, finally and without apology, to take Shinn at her word. And then let the silence do what the silence does. What arrives will not always look like what you pictured. It will often be better. It will almost always be different. But it will come through the cracks of a life that has been subtly, steadily realigned from the inside out. By 3 words said daily, from a place of growing trust. That is the law. Not magic. Not wishful thinking. A mechanism as reliable as gravity, once you stop fighting it. There's a question I want to address before we go any further. 'Cause I know it's there. I've heard it from too many women not to know that it's sitting somewhere in the back of your mind right now. even if you haven't quite let yourself say it out loud. What if I've already waited too long? It's a particular kind of fear, different from the ordinary doubt that shows up at the beginning of any new practice. This one has a timestamp on it. It's tied to age, to the years that have already passed, to the sense that there was a window somewhere, and it may have closed while you were busy surviving everything else life handed you. Shinn addressed this directly, and without softening it into something easier to hear. She said there is no such thing as too late inside the operation of spiritual law. The law does not have an age requirement. It does not factor in how many years you spent not knowing about it, or knowing about it and not quite believing it, or believing it in theory but not enough to actually act on it. It responds to the present moment. Only the present moment. And the present moment is always, without exception, available to you. She had clients in their 60s who experienced shifts that their younger selves would have considered impossible. Women who had written off entire categories of their financial lives as settled, closed, no longer worth hoping about. Who had made a quiet, private peace with less than they deserved because the alternative, hoping again, felt more dangerous than accepting. And she would sit with them and say, "The law doesn't know your age, knows your word." That is either the most comforting thing you've ever heard or the most confronting. Maybe both at once. Because if the law doesn't care how old you are, then the only thing standing between you and a different financial reality is not time, not youth, not the years you can't get back. It's the quality of what you're speaking, and what you're allowing yourself to believe while you speak it. That is entirely changeable. Starting today. Starting with 3 words said in whatever kitchen, whatever car, whatever quiet corner of your life you happen to be in right now. But I want to go one layer deeper. Because Shinn taught something about this particular fear, the fear of having waited too long, that I think is more useful than simple reassurance. She said that the feeling of too late is itself a decree. An unconscious one. A negative one. But a decree nonetheless. Spoken internally with a great deal of emotional intensity by women who have been rehearsing it for years without realizing that's what they were doing. Too late is a belief that the subconscious has received, filed, and begun building evidence for. Every time an opportunity seemed to pass you by, that belief got a little stronger. Every year that went by without the shift you were hoping for added another layer of confirmation. Not because the law was agreeing with you, but because you were, without knowing it, decreeing limitation with the same faithful consistency that Shinn wanted you to apply to abundance. The work, then, is not just to add a new decree on top of the old one. It's to recognize the old one for what it is. To see it clearly without judgment, because judgment only adds more emotional charge to something you're trying to release. Just to see it. That's what I've been saying. That's the signal I've been sending. And then to choose differently. Not dramatically. Not with a grand declaration that today everything changes. Just quietly. The way you'd correct course on a long drive. Not a sharp turn, just a slight adjustment of the wheel, held steadily, until the destination comes back into view. I am provided. Said by a woman who has decided that she is not too late. Said by a woman who has chosen, in this moment, to let that be true. That choice, that small, private, daily choice, is what Shinn staked her entire life's work on. And the women who made it found out she was right. Before we get to the final piece of what Shinn taught about this, and there's one more piece, the one that ties everything together, I want to take a moment here. If you've been with me for this entire video, you already know something that most people who read Shinn's books never quite land on. Not because it isn't there on the page, but because it's the kind of thing you have to be ready to hear before it actually reaches you. You heard it today. That means something. Means you were ready. And that readiness doesn't happen by accident. It happens because something in you has been moving toward this, quietly beneath everything else that's been going on in your life. I want to ask you something before we close. If what you heard today resonated, if Ruth's story felt familiar, if the idea of I am provided landed somewhere real in your body, would you be willing to do one small thing right now? Subscribe to this channel. Not because I need the number, but because when you subscribe, this content keeps finding you. The next video, and the one after that, will come to you instead of you having to go looking for it in the moments when you need it most. And it tells whatever invisible algorithm decides who sees this that there are women out here who want something real. Not hype, not promises, not a 5-step system for manifesting $1 million by Friday. Just the truth, taught slowly, by a woman who believed in it enough to write it down 100 years ago. And if this video helped you today, leave a comment below and tell me just one word if that's all you have. The word that landed. The thing you're taking with you. Or tell me what you want part 2 to be about. Because there is more to say about the spoken word. About the specific conditions Shinn described for a decree to carry its full power. About what she called the 4 steps to demonstration. About the cases she documented where the shift came within hours of a single correctly spoken word. There's enough here for another full conversation. And I want to have it with you. But right now let's finish what we started. Because the last piece of what Shinn taught about the spoken word is the one most people never get to. The one she almost didn't include in the book because she wasn't sure her readers were ready for it. It has to do not with what you say but with what you stop saying. She was very specific about this. Precise in a way that surprises people when they first encounter it, because it asks something that feels almost counterintuitive to women who have been taught that the way to fix a problem is to face it squarely, talk about it honestly, name it clearly so it loses its power over you. Shinn said the opposite. She said that every time you speak a problem, describe it in detail, rehearse it to a friend, narrate it to yourself in the shower, you are decreeing it. You are using the most powerful creative force available to a human being to build more of what you do not want. Not because talking is wrong, but because the spoken word she taught does not distinguish between what you want to create and what you want to dissolve. It only creates. Whatever you give it, with emotional intensity, with repetition, with the full weight of your attention and your voice, it builds. And most of us, without realizing it, are far more consistent in our negative decrees than our positive ones. We speak our problems daily, in detail, with great feeling. We speak our desired reality hesitantly, briefly, with an undercurrent of doubt. The practice she recommended was not silence about everything difficult. It was a conscious, deliberate choice about what you give your voice to, what you choose to make real by speaking it. I am provided grows stronger every time you say it. And it grows stronger still every time you choose not to say the thing that contradicts it. There's a moment Shinn described that I keep coming back to. Not a dramatic one. Not a miracle witnessed in public or a transformation that made it into the papers. A quiet moment, private. The kind that doesn't make for a good story at a dinner party, but that changes everything for the woman it happens to. A woman alone in a room. Morning light. The particular silence of early hours before the day has made its demands. She opens her mouth. Not to pray. Not to plead. Not to rehearse the list of everything that hasn't worked yet. Just 3 words. Spoken slowly. Spoken from somewhere below the fear. Spoken by the part of her that is older and quieter and more certain than the part that lies awake running numbers. I am provided. And then silence. Not the silence of waiting anxiously for something to happen. The silence of a woman who has said what is true and knows that truth does not require her to stand over it and watch it work. The silence of someone who has, for this one moment, stopped arguing with the law and simply let it operate. That moment, that small, unremarkable, utterly private moment, is where everything Shinn taught begins. Not in the demonstration. Not in the check that arrives or the opportunity that opens or the burden that quietly lifts. Before any of that. In the moment a woman decides to take her own voice seriously. To treat what she says as something that matters. As something that moves through the air and meets the world and comes back to her shaped by what she sent out. Not as poetry, as physics, as law. You have been speaking your whole life. The question Shinn asked, the question she asked everyone who sat across from her, tired and hoping and not quite sure they believed anymore, was simply this. What have you been saying? Not what have you been thinking. Not what have you been feeling or fearing or secretly suspecting about yourself and your chances and whether the good things in life were ever really meant for someone like you. What have you been saying? Because that, she taught, is what has been building your world. Quietly, faithfully, without judgment and without mercy. Exactly what you gave it, given back. And the moment you understand that, really understand it, not as an idea but as something you feel land in the body with a particular weight of things that are simply true, everything changes. Not because the law changes. It never changes. 'Cause you do. You pick up your voice differently. You notice what you're about to say before it leaves your mouth. You catch yourself mid-sentence rehearsing a problem and you stop. Not with guilt, just with recognition. Not that. And you say something else instead. 3 words if that's all you have. Said in a kitchen or a car or a quiet room at 6 in the morning while the rest of the world is still asleep. Said by a woman who has decided, finally, simply without fanfare, to stop decreeing what she doesn't want and start giving her voice to what she does. That woman is not waiting for permission. She is not waiting for proof. She already knows what Shinn knew. The word goes out, and the world rearranges itself around it.